This week on Accelerate Slate, join Katie and I as we discuss reasons for getting or keeping Slate on your campus. Our hope is that you'll hear about features you're not using and help strengthen your argument for why Slate is an important tool for your team. Welcome, everyone, to Accelerate Slate, the enrollmentFUEL podcast. You are here today with your hosts, Susanna Lehman-Mayo and
Katie Jordan.
And we are excited today. Our topic is the case for Slate. So this came about because we see a lot of comments in like the Facebook group and other places where people are saying, well, my VP, our president, somebody is wondering why we should go with Slate, or B, we have Slate and they're thinking about getting rid of it. So how do you make that argument on campus in a way that makes sense? Obviously, Katie and I are huge advocates for using Slate. I think that
Bias, yeah.
right. Yeah, we kind of like it a lot, and can definitely see the benefits. So we wanted to take some time today to just kind of chat through some of those things. So one of the first points we talked about is the replacement of other softwares and partners that you might have on campus. So I don't know, Katie, do you want to kind of jump into that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So we don't introduce this as a way to say, like, phase out other vendors, but it is a really good point for Slate being kind of a one-stop shop for being able to bring everything in-house. So not naming names at all, but just putting some things out there for you. If you are a big texting school, particularly Susanna, I think with the push notifications from Summit 2022, how was that last year?
Ugh, good
Um,
question.
We're not going to talk about that. Not enough time. But Slate texting, I think, has really, really come an incredibly long way. Great for individual texting, great for batch texting. The event reminders in particular,
Oh,
just
yes. Event
right.
reminders are hands down my favorite reason to use texting and Slate. Plus, it's so easy. I had previously set up an integration with another texting platform and Slate. It was fine, but it was messy, and you still had to maintain lists in the other system, and it was just not as easy and not as user friendly. And it was also a little bit more expensive when you think about the volume of text that most schools are sending out of Slate.
Oh my gosh, very true. And I know if we spend all of our time on texting, we are simply doomed. But being able to use snippets in texting too, huge time saver. Love it.
Agreed.
Um,
Agreed.
but that kind of goes along with having the ability to do all of your emails in-house. Similarly, let's just say we have a little bit of a bias with Deliver Designer, in case you missed that webinar, but it does allow for some incredibly beautiful in-house branding. And as well, just being able to pull your list, send your emails, go.
Right, right. Well, and if you think about it, Slate really is a CRM, customer relationship management tool. So it is about those communication pieces, and Slate makes it so easy to do.
And then, same thing, phone calls. Slate Voice has gotten to be huge. Slate Video. I know a school that like recorded thousands of videos and like got each of them to link up with students' individual portals. Incredibly cool stuff. And I know we talked a little bit about Woofu. I think you're more familiar with it than I am.
Well, and when we say WooFoo, we're really just talking about web forms that might live on your website. And part of the issue that I know I had with that is it's not secure. Your website doesn't have the same security level that you can get with Slate. So being able to replace those forms and using forms that are directly integrated with the system, I mean, because Slate is a customer facing CRM. So, I remember when I used to get those forms, I would have to get them in and then
Wow.
type them into another system. What a pain. So to not have to do that is a huge perk. And it also means it's another system you're not paying for.
Right, 100%. And then, kind of along talking with all of the updates from last year's summit, the increased abilities for payments in Slate. Oh,
I
that
agree. Agreed. Well, and we've got, like the active scheduler on our list too. And I love active scheduler. I actually use it all the time with potential partners and with current partners to say, here's my availability. And when I was with a school, we used it for graduate recruiters, and we used it for our undergraduate recruiters when we do financial aid phone calls. So getting people to be able to sign up for a time that fits your schedule is awesome. And not having to go to something like a Calendly or another type of system is awesome. Just being able to keep it all in Slate. And of course, the benefit of that is it marks the student as attended and registered when they sign up and when they show up for the event. So there's that huge perk there.
Yeah, no, definitely having the very streamlined process. It's better, you know. It's Active Scheduler was a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant piece of coding that
I love it. I love it.
yeah, and I know we've talked some, you and I, about the live texting bot. Let's face it, AI is a huge topic these days. I don't know how many people know that like Slate has had that functionality for a while. I worked on it last or first, let's say, a couple years ago in like 2019, 2020. So Slate has had that for a while, that if you're on a Slate page, there can be the pop-up. Students type their questions, the Slate bot recognizes words, responds, can escalate it to inbox, but like that has for a long time been built-in functionality.
Right, right. And, there's lots of other potential partners or other products that you might be cutting out when you use Slate. But when you think about the costs of each of these different pieces, I think it makes sense to just kind of keep it all in that Slate bucket. Then the next thing we had on our list really was talking about some of those processes that can be streamlined. And we don't need to necessarily go through our entire list, but I think it's important to know that when you're doing a Slate implementation, when you're working with Slate, the way I like to approach things is to talk to somebody and say, okay, what's your current process? And let's talk about your ideal process. So how do we use the tools that are in Slate to make sure that your processes make the most sense and can help you be smooth and get
I
things
mean,
done.
very, very, very true for implementation. You never want to hear the sentence, well, this is how we've always done it. But also your favorite sentence. But I think it's also a good reminder for schools that have been in for a few years, just because this is how you built it, it doesn't mean that this is how it has to be. Especially, we've even mentioned like two new functionality things that have come up in the past couple years already. So always worth it to, I mean, we'll talk about it. Attend Summit, keep up on what's happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I think when you go back and think about those pieces and those new parts of Slate that are available to you. One of the perks of using Slate is it's not, a full upgrade the way you think about like a student information system. So for example, I've talked to schools before that are on an older version of a banner or colleague, and they run into all kinds of issues, and their IT department spends hours and hours and hours getting them to the next level. And with Slate, new things just appear, and they're normally kind of subtle, or sometimes you see in one of the groups, the Slack or the Facebook group. Did anyone else notice this new button today? And so they integrate these changes and implement these changes in a way that's not going to be causing issues for the school. And so there's no need for you to do some kind of big reboot every time there's a new piece that's available.
And I'll just put a very quick plug in as a side note. I know you and I both follow the product management last week at Technolutions updates. If you are not, I think it's replaced a lot of the functionality, the content of Slatest News. So getting that weekly, huge.
It's
Helps you
awesome.
understand those buttons magically appearing.
Right? Well, and the nice thing is you see the comments of other people, so you can see when they're continuing to develop the product and make edits to it. So I think that's kind of huge too, to be able to track and understand what's going on.
But going back to your point of, expediting some of the processes, that's one of the words I'm very bad at saying. I don't know if you knew that. Processes, here we are. With Inslate, we've both worked on a bunch of common app integrations. It's time consuming, but you kind of do it once and
Right? Right?
we've been in admissions long enough. I've read paper applications. I'm not going to tell you the last year I read paper applications. You'd be embarrassed for me. But never having to do that again with Slate, huge. I mean, same kind of thing with the coalition application. Working on a CAS integration right now, a little bit more on the graduates, a lot more on the graduate side, but still one of those things you bring it into Slate and it goes.
Right. Right.
Huge.
Yeah, you've got to love it. I mean, I still remember when we did our first decision release, we actually bought some champagne and did a toast in our back patio. But one of the women on our team who had done data entry said she had just gotten a box of ACT scores and we used to hand enter all of those. And she said, oh my gosh, this was like 35 hours of work before, and I did it in 30 seconds. So you think about how much time can be saved between that and parchment premium. There's a huge opportunity to save time and have your people redirect their energy towards these other pieces that need to be done as part of keeping your slate up to date. Or there might be other opportunities in the office for that person to find other uses and learn some new skills.
100%. I mean, so in all of my free time, one of the hats that I wear is I'm super involved with PACAC, the Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counselors, got it right. Um, on the executive committee and the chair of college fairs. And so one of the things with PACAC is that we are huge proponents, huge partners with StriveScan. Love them. Said I wasn't going to name names, but I feel like I can name names in a really good way. They've been wonderful to work with. And let me tell you about how the data from the college fairs with StriveScan just magically flows into Slate. It is a work of art. They are killing it.
That's fabulous news. I mean, anytime you can get those names quicker, I mean, it's all about that speed to lead and making sure that you've got the names in a quick way, and then you're able to communicate with them right away before they
100%, you're
forget who you
exactly
are,
right.
right? It's important.
It,
Um,
it is.
So one of the other things we have on our list, of course, is Slate Print. So I know not every school is using that, but Slate Print does allow you to design and have files uploaded, so then they can be sent directly to the printer and personalized for a student. So that's a cool opportunity. I know you can also do that with a home printer, so you don't necessarily have to use Slate Print, but you can have a query that's ready to go and easy to drop to your printer, whether you do that through an SFTP or whether you're manually pulling it each week and adding it. Still a simpler process than what you might be used to in a different system.
Pretty good price too, right?
Right? Yeah, I think all of it's pretty reasonably priced, which is one of the other points we have on there. Technolutions has not done price raises for current clients in their entire being. So that's kind of a cool thing too. Yeah, let's cross our fingers and keep hoping that they do that. But I think that's a piece to think about too. So, I used to hear this idea that Slate was like the Ferrari as far as costs go. But really, when you think about everything that's encompassed in it, it really is a pretty reasonable cost for the work that you're able to do and the amount of time you're able to save and the products that are part of it.
Mhm. Oh, 100%. So, I mean, we mentioned emails a little bit earlier. Let's talk a little bit more about all the things that you get with that beyond just sending out the message, right? Get it out there. Great. Strong first step. How does it actually do?
Good question.
Thank you so much. I just mean in terms of like being able to query on individual messages, individual links within individual messages, like who is clicking on what. That is huge. I know you and I, like a while ago, had the competition over who had the better email subject line because we're incredibly cool, shared a client, and we did the A/B testing. Do you remember this?
I do. I do. We sound really nerdy right now, but that's okay.
I remember it strongly because your subject line open rates kicked mine in the butt. It was a bummer. But we know that with the in-house marketing analytics, so there's something to say for that.
Very true.
Oh my gosh. I mean, what it was fun. It was fun. I'm working now on things like tele ambassador calling campaign, moving them into a portal, getting them like a flowing spreadsheet that will automatically, if the student doesn't pick up, send an email. It's
Love
pretty
it.
tough. Thank you. Thank
Love
you.
it. Well, and
But
I think when we're continuing to think about those email pieces, there's the campaigns that are available. So, if you're not using drip marketing, you don't want to use only drip marketing, obviously, but it does provide an opportunity for you to continue to communicate with students on a regular basis to keep their interest level going. But then
Yeah.
one of the underutilized areas of messaging that I think schools need to talk more with their web people about is the UTM tracking. So if you're
Yes.
not using it, it's super easy, but it allows your web team to be able to better identify how students are getting to your site by, making sure you've got the campaign in there and the method and all those pieces. So that's a really cool functionality that doesn't help just Slate, but helps your web design and helps your web team keep things moving and understand their analytics as well.
Mhm. And I'll just throw ping out there, um, just to say that that is, again, just a built-in Slate feature that can be a little underutilized, but similar to UTM tracking, helps you understand how your students are getting to where they get. Being able to send a message like, "Ooh, saw you are on our financial aid page for 10 minutes. Do you have a question?"
Right?
It's huge.
Yeah, and I think, when we think about all of these things, one of my favorite reasons for keeping Slate or getting Slate is it allows the admissions team to really have, or advancement or student success, whichever team you are, it allows you to have control over everything. And, you know, in other CRMs, you may need to have IT run everything, which is not the worst thing, but IT often wears many hats and has to serve all of campus, where your admission, advancement, student success teams are really just serving their own interests,
Mhm,
their own students,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So when you work in Slate and you don't have to have that computer science background, it allows you to think, okay, well, here's what we need to do. This is the time of year we need to do this and build the process around what you need to do. So it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit ago. But it also encourages your team to get more creative with the way they work, period, not just in Slate, but they can think more strategically about territory management and their recruitment efforts and goals. And, being able to give them reports that show how their metrics have come out in the last year or two. Going to say that again. Uh, Giving them reports to allow them to see how their metrics have come out in the last year or two is so helpful for your team to become better at their job. So to be able to build it in house and for somebody on the team to be able to say, "Hey, Katie, can you put this together for us?" And admissions, and student success, advancement. So it's easy for you to be able to translate what they need to do into a process that's going to work for the team. And I say you as in a Slate captain, not necessarily you as an enrollment fuel
Right.
ninja, right?
I mean, I think there's a lot of value to what you're saying because it's not just about like, hey, it doesn't have to be IT. They're helpful in so many parts of Slate, but being able to have it in-house, we're pretty open about not being computer science background people.
Right, right. Well, and the other thing it allows you to do is as you think about who all needs to be involved in recruitment efforts or advancement or student success efforts, you can start thinking about how you add other campus partners into Slate. So, when you think about like athletics, they're often using a third party to find students, track their information, all that. But that could be moved into Slate as well, or integrated with Slate so that they're able to see what's the student's checklist look like. Has the student been admitted? So that way they're sharing the right information. And depending on whether or not you're allowing them to have full access into Slate or just a portal, you can determine which information they can see and share with students, because they are building relationships. I mean, I used to work with music faculty, and they're very much like athletics. They Students are choosing the school based on who teaches trumpet, who teaches trombone, who's going to be their voice instructor. So they're involved in the recruitment effort in a way that most faculty aren't. So to be able to give them access to that information versus what I used to have to do, which was pull a list into a spreadsheet and create a tab for every instrument and send it out to faculty once a month, which again, data security red flag goes off. This was a huge win to be able to move that into Slate and to share that information with them in Slate.
But I mean, so completely true. But the only thing I would add to that is with the portal, it's not just giving them the information, gives them the ability to log interactions, go straight to the student record. Admission knows much more in depth what's happening with that student. everything good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you've got a coach who all of a sudden says, "Hey, you're going to be admitted," they can log that and then you can see when the student's been denied. Not that that's ever happened before.
That felt very specific.
It might have happened. It might have happened. Sorry, coaches. We just know sometimes you go a little rogue and that's all right.
You know, here we are. Here we are. So I mean, one thing that I think admissions does a heck of a lot is travel, right? I remember fondly those days when I wasn't just hanging out in my house.
Well, it's admissions, but also advancement. They're always on the road meeting with donors.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and one thing I got asked just last week was how do I determine like my cost per name? Working with a school that's doing a ton of international travel. They're like, we're going to Africa. Is it worth it? And I'm like, first off, that just sounds cool. Yes, it is. But a little bit more officially. We talked about
Also fair.
storing, you know,
Fair.
the ability to scan your receipts into your phone, into the Slate app automatically, and then query on that. Again, red paper applications, carried my receipts around in an envelope. I've done it. I can do it. Scanning is better.
Right? Well, and I think back to the days where we would have only the cards, you know, we'd have cards at college fairs and you'd have to code them all and make sure you tracked them, but we didn't always have a great way of tracking which college fair a student came from. And so with Slate, when you've added them to an event as part of your travel, it allows you to see how that student came in and see if that was a good college fair to go to or not. And
Gotcha.
I mean, living in Ohio, there's a lot of tiny little college fairs we'd go to, some of them not close to anything else. And to be able to say, like, okay, well, we traveled 4 hours to this college fair. How did we do? Is it worth going next year? Is super helpful. So, you know, being able to create reports off of that or even just look at the last year's travel to see can make such a big difference when it comes time for you to do your travel planning.
Yes. I mean, so you have the objective numbers, but you can also have the subjective. Get here half an hour early, there's no parking.
Right, right, absolutely. Or I ran out of view books at this one, so
Good
maybe
stuff.
bring more next year. So even though it
100.
might not have got a lot of cards, you've got grabbers,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
I know we've talked a couple times about emails, but the functionality of being able to email a student personally, like a week or so in advance of a high school visit, a college fair, it's huge. Big new fan of emailing school counselors. Didn't talk too much about slate.org, but like I could talk for a long time about slate.org.
I
So
think it's underutilized as well.
yeah, just so much functionality around doing your best to maximize how effective your travel is, but then being able to measure how that worked afterwards. Do you want to talk about Voyager with travel?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Voyager.
Love
How
Voyager.
Yeah, it's cool. So tell me why you think it's so cool, Katie.
Thank you so much for asking. No one ever does. So I'm a huge data visualization nerd. Very cool, right? So with that, I think what Voyager does, especially with the ACS, American Consumer Science data, we'll see, um, gives you the ability to do the overlays that you can look at within your trips while you are planning where you're going to go. So you build it in Voyager, it magically talks to trips. If you're looking to do things like increase different representation groups on campus, like Slate stores that for you. So underutilized. I think it is one of the coolest tools that is, again, we've said included a lot of times. Um, it's included, it is there for you. It is data that you can just grab and make
Right.
your travel all the more effective if you're looking for any different groups measured, married by the ACS.
Well, and I would say the other piece that I like to use the Voyager for is search name buys. So at my previous institution, I was in charge of purchasing names, and we didn't have this kind of tool. So I would just go through and try to pull data and look at counties and look at, various information, try to figure out which names we should buy if we wanted to make any changes for the year. Where Voyager allows you to kind of build those layers in and say, okay, well, here's where we bought names, but here's where we got students to come from. And so when you think about those types of pieces, it can just be incredibly helpful for leadership to decide if there's new markets you want to explore or purchase. And, search is expensive. So how can you help bring down that cost a little bit? And using Voyager can be an awesome, awesome idea.
100%. I feel like we've made some strong arguments for keeping or getting Slate so far.
I would agree, but I think there's still more because
There
we
is.
love Slate. And so, let's think a little bit more about the leadership because one of the other pieces that I love is the reporting
Mhm.
functionality out of Slate. So when you've got that opportunity to build a report that your VP can pull at the click of a button, it makes it so much easier for them to see live data and real-time comparisons with previous years or measured against your goals. And so when you think about that piece for someone who's got to be at a board meeting tomorrow, if you've got a report that they can rely on, it's going to make their lives so much easier and make your lives a little bit easier. Because I don't know if you've ever had the experience where somebody walks up to you and says, "Hey, I'm going to need this report tomorrow." And you're like, "Well, I'm just going to spend the rest of my day pulling this data for you and creating a report that's live as of today at 11:31." Cool. So to have that always running, always live, and just being able to click a button to get the data is super, super helpful for your leadership.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, it is. And let's talk a little bit for 1 second. Data Explorer. Ah, I built it for a dean of admissions to be able to use in a board presentation. Word on the street was that showed pretty darn well. Being able to do the on the fly, like visual data,
I believe that. I
that
believe
goes
that.
so very well. You gotta have fun with it, you know?
And that's the beauty of Slate, right? It's always fun, especially if you're us, I guess.
We are extremely cool. I hope that Get Slate, Katie and Susanna are very cool, like in order of takeaways from this.
We'll put that in the byline for this webinar, right?
Love it. Um, awesome. Okay, so great for leadership, but also so great for day-to-day work. If it is an event day and you have the students reaching out last minute of like, oh my gosh, where do I go? I'm running 10 minutes late. Where do I go to meet up with the tour after? I'm a little sick. I can't make. Not that I did events, not that this is bringing anything up for me, but being able to use Inbox day of for things like that, it was huge because I didn't have to be logged into my personal email and the institutional email. And let's just say that a student was emailing like their counselor separately, having it all in the one spot, lifesaver. Mm,
Yeah, nope, I would agree with you on that. I think it's just it's a cool tool and makes life so much easier for everybody.
mm, Inbox.
So I think one of my other favorite pieces of Slate is being able to track where students actually came from. So, if you keep your origin sources up to date, you know that Slate looks across every aspect from interactions to source formats to event folders or event templates or form folders or forms themselves. And that's going to make your life easier to be able to say, okay, well, these students got to us by this way. And so when you're looking again back at those name buys and back at those other pieces, to be able to say, okay, well, this student's first source was XYZ is going to make your life a little bit easier and going to make it so that you can actually make informed decisions as to where you want to buy names, where you want to promote different things, and how you want to move things forward.
You know what I like about you is I don't think a lot of people say that origin sources are their favorite thing. You just came right out there with I love these. Like they're great data, I agree, but like whew.
Well, Katie, in all fairness, when we would do our fact book each year, we always published how students came to us. And so
Didn't
being
know
able to
that.
have reliable origin sources was super helpful when it came time for me to have to do that reporting to institutional research.
Well, I did not know that.
Yep. Fun fact, it was like a 40-hour project to do that every year.
Oh my gosh.
There were other
Okay.
data points too, but Slate
That's
made it easier.
we would do an admitted student like welcome day speech that would say things like the average student here today is involved with 57 activities with a GPA of 76.4 out of a 4-point scale, to be clear.
Of course, yeah.
They'll be playing at least 12 sports in college, and we would just pull all of that. It'd be great.
Yeah, and to have
Oh,
that data at your fingertips just makes such a difference. Such a difference.
so I think a big takeaway from today that we've been hammering on is that like we're huge Slate nerds, right? There is such a Slate community out there. I don't think you see this kind of passion for the average CRM, shall we say.
That's fair. And I think if you're not involved in those different communities, it is so important to get out there, be on the Facebook group, be in the Slack group, check the community forums, all kinds of opportunities for you to connect with one another. And of course, there is Slate Summit, which is coming up very soon.
Pretty jazzed.
Me too. Me too. So I think we've only got a couple more items on our list. So let's talk a little bit about your CBOs.
Hmm. Let's talk about them. So, of course, like comes standard with the organizations, there is all of the opportunity to add in your organization contacts, all of that good stuff. But CEOs, I think, have really, really risen in popularity in terms of recruiting and being able to, much like the events we've been talking about, track where you went, how many students you spoke to, who you connected with, should you go back next year. Huge. And Slate does let you do that through custom data sets. It's a really cool one to build. There's very nice documentation on it in the knowledge base. But as we've been saying this whole time, being able to keep it in the one place, having it as part of your trip, huge.
I totally agree. And one of the next things that I know I love about Slate, because this was another piece that we had another software we used to review applications.
Was it like
And
paper and a piece of paper?
we had moved into paperless by the time we got to Slate, but being able to move out of the other evaluation software we were using was huge. And being able to use the reader again in the same system, not having to open another software, not having to go to that. But the other thing is you've got the ability to actually score files and you can do some calculations in there to make sure that you're using a fair system for evaluation.
Hmm.
But you can also move those reader forms over to the registrar's file as needed if that's part of your document retention policy. And, for faculty who might not be as comfortable with software, the Slate Reader does make it very easy to do an evaluation. We had a situation at one point at my previous school where we had a scholarship competition. And our English faculty would review the essays and evaluate them in Slate. Well, 2020, of course, came, as we all remember. And they needed to find a new way to evaluate students for their English placement because they were using test scores. And of course, tests became not as much of a part of the admission process due to 2020 shutting pretty much everything down. So we actually had an English faculty member suggest that we give students the opportunity to submit an essay that they would evaluate so that they could be placed for English. And
Like
that
that.
was, yeah, that was a huge win because we looked at this and thought, oh, okay, so we've got faculty members wanting to use Slate more. So I think that just shows how easy the reader is to use and get set up. And obviously, I used workflow bins for this additional reading piece, but it worked like a dream, and the faculty felt very comfortable doing it, which is a win.
We had similar-ish, which was a portal that took our first year advisors into Reader within Slate, so they could just see the students like kind of cover page the application as well as their essay, so they could get a baseline familiarity with the students who would be assigned to them come the fall. All they had to do was log into the portal, click into the student, boom. Loved it. Um, that was, I think, one of the more successful pieces of campus buy-in that we really had going on. And being able to show just the selected parts of the application was huge and so, so, so easy for them. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our last point for the day, and I know you're wondering how can you end, but I'm sure there's more to the list. But our last point that we'll make today is really about the use of widgets and reports on the dashboard. So I'll let Katie kind of give a little bit more of her thoughts on that one.
I would not have called on me to say that my final closing argument is widgets. Um,
Okay,
however,
that's fair.
what I do love is a good dashboard report, right? All the functionality of a widget and then like one or two more pieces you can control. But it's one of like, I really think the easiest things to do in Slate, because all you have to do is put whatever you want to in the system folder, subfolder homepage, you're off and running, everyone can see it. You can still do the static HTML like you could with widgets, so like the click here for your different queries. You can still do all of like the flow charts. You can still do anything with widgets that you wanted to, and a million more things, because now you are doing configurable joins builds rather than a couple widget drop downs.
Right, right. Well, and I think the benefit of that is it's really about the customization so that when you're logging into Slate, you can give whoever it is that's logging in a to-do list. You can tell them what their priorities are just by creating a couple of reports that live on the dashboard. You can share with them the numbers if that's where your leadership decides that you want your admission counselors focusing their energy. So it's that custom piece to say this is our slate and this is our process and this is how we want our team to function on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's really that big perk of the widgets and reports on the dashboard.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you can make it look very, you've heard me say it, I am big on making it look like a very customized experience when it is an automated experience, right? And I think that even includes things like your dashboard reports and widgets if you're that kind of person, because you're able to use like the filter of staff assigned equals current user. So when your admission counselors log in, what they see are their students, their numbers. Looks like you built something custom for them. Little do they know.
Exactly.
Kind of stuff.
So we are done with our list for today. But if you have other thoughts, please feel free to message us and let us know what you would argue to keep Slate or to get Slate on your campus. So thank you for listening today. Again, this is Accelerate Slate, the EnrollmentFUEL podcast with your hosts, Susanna and Katie. And until next time,